Welcome to the Book Reader channel.
On this episode of Street Chronicles, Cherry drops a bombshell. She lets Skate and Law know exactly what Will has done. But in the streets, knowing too much can be deadly. Now, Cherry and Will are out of the picture, and the block is hot. With Skate and Law sitting in a cell, the question remains, can the hood hold water? Stay tuned, because this is your new favorite audiobook, right here on the Book Reader channel. The room smelled like sweat and cheap coffee. The walls a dull gray that seemed to close in on him. Skate sat slouched in the metal chair, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. A single overhead light buzzed above him, casting long shadows across the table. Detective Miller sat across from him, rolling up his sleeves like he had all night to play this game. He placed a thick folder on the table and flipped it open, revealing crime scene photos, empty warehouses, scattered shell casings, bloodstains. Skate didn't flinch. Long night, huh? Miller said casually. We got a mess on our hands, and I am thinking you can help clean it up. Skate scoffed, shifting in his seat. Man, I don't know what you're talking about. Miller smirked like he had heard that line 100 times before. See, that's funny, 'cause your name keeps coming up. Cherry? Will? The mail truck? He leaned forward. That ring any bells? Skate kept his mouth shut. He knew better than to fold early. Miller sighed and stood up. He walked to the door, knocked twice, and a younger officer walked in, holding a plastic bag. He placed it on the table with a thud. Skate's eyes flickered to it for a second. Miller smirked. Cigarette. He reached into the bag and pulled out a pack, shaking one loose. Or maybe you're hungry. He tossed a bag of chips onto the table, letting it slide toward Skate. Skate licked his lips. He hadn't eaten in hours, and the stress was making his stomach twist. But he wasn't stupid. He leaned back. I ain't no rat, he muttered. Miller shrugged. Suit yourself. He lit a cigarette for himself instead, exhaling slowly. We got Law in the other room. Bet he's got more to say. Law sat still, posture straight, his eyes locked on Detective Ramirez, who was flipping through pages like he already had the answers. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Ramirez said, leaning back in his chair. The warehouse. The mail truck? Somebody talked. And now? We got 2 bodies and 2 men in cuffs. Law didn't blink. Then charge me. Ramirez chuckled. Not yet. See, you got 1 shot to set things straight. You tell me what went down. Maybe we work something out. Law gave a slow smile. Man, I ain't got nothing to say. Ramirez nodded like he expected that. He reached under the table, pulled out the same plastic bag Miller had in the other room. He placed a cigarette and a bag of chips in front of Law. No games. Just a smoke and a snack, Ramirez said. Law glanced down, then back up. You think this gonna make me talk? Ramirez smirked. Nah, but it makes the waiting easier. Law took the cigarette, rolling it between his fingers. He leaned forward as Ramirez lit it, inhaling deep. Then he exhaled slow, a smirk creeping onto his face. You got the wrong ones, Detective. Miller checked his watch. Your boy's not talking. But guess what? He leaned in, voice dropping. Somebody will. Skate looked away, jaw tight. Miller smirked. Enjoy your chips. Then he stood up and walked out, leaving Skate sitting in silence, the sound of the clock ticking louder than ever. The block was burning, not with fire, but with pressure. Every corner, every alley, every trap house, police were swarming through like wolves looking for a kill. The task force had their orders, and they weren't leaving without bodies in cuffs. Sirens screamed through the night, blue and red lights flashing against brick buildings, making the whole neighborhood glow like a crime scene. It didn't matter if you were guilty or not. If you were outside, you were getting snatched. Boom, boom, boom. The door to an apartment off Benning Road damn near came off the hinges as a team of officers stormed in. A group of young dudes inside barely had time to react before they were thrown to the floor, cuffs snapping tight around their wrists. Where's the guns? One officer barked. Where's the damn weapons? We don't know nothing, man. One of the guys, Durock, protested as he was dragged to his feet. Nah? The cop shoved him against the wall. Then maybe you know something about the bodies that been dropping. D-Rock kept his mouth shut. He knew the rules. A few blocks over, another raid was going down at an old trap house that had been running for years. The front door had already been kicked in. The inside flipped upside down. Old couches torn apart. Floorboards ripped up. A lieutenant paced outside, watching as officers dragged out 3 young hustlers, shoving them into squad cars. One of them, Lil Mo, was still running his mouth. Man, this some bull. Y'all ain't got no warrant. The lieutenant smirked, lighting a cigarette. We don't need one tonight. They weren't playing fair. Inside a dimly lit corner store, a group of old heads sat near the counter, watching the chaos unfold through the security cameras. Shit's getting ugly, one of them muttered, shaking his head. They snatching everybody up. Somebody talked, another one said, rubbing his beard. Ain't no way they moving like this, lest somebody gave 'em something to go on. The cashier, an older man who had seen the neighborhood change over the years, exhaled through his nose. They just need one weak link. That was the problem. With the hood on fire, somebody was bound to break. The stolen mail truck sat in the middle of an abandoned lot, deep in enemy territory. Graffiti-covered buildings loomed in the background, and the cracked pavement was littered with old bottles, broken glass, and the remnants of past crimes. Shooter leaned against a stolen sedan, watching as one of his boys doused the truck in gasoline, the fumes thick in the cold night air. Make sure it's soaked, Shooter muttered, glancing over his shoulder. No sirens yet, no flashing lights, but they couldn't linger. The plan was simple. Make sure the heat didn't stay on their side of town. Dump the truck in a rival neighborhood, torch it, and let the cops shift their focus. Let somebody else take the fall. One of the younger hitters, Rico, flicked open a lighter. You sure about this? Ain't no going back after this. Shooter smirked, pulling his hoodie tighter. It's already done. Rico nodded, then flicked the lighter and dropped it. Whoosh. The truck went up fast, flames licking the sky, black smoke curling upward like a signal to the whole city. The heat radiated off the metal, making the air shimmer. The fire cracked and popped, the tires exploding one by one. Inside, whatever evidence had been left, fingerprints, DNA, anything tying them to the jobs, was turning to ash. As the fire roared, sirens finally started wailing in the distance. "Time to go," Shooter said, already sliding into the car. They peeled out, disappearing into the night just as the first police cars screamed onto the scene. Now, all they had to do was sit back and watch the chaos unfold. The clock was ticking. Skate and Law sat in separate holding cells, the cold metal benches pressing into their backs. The air was thick with the scent of sweat, old piss, and desperation. Other men were locked up too, some for petty charges, some facing real time. But Skate and Law weren't worried. They knew the drill. Say nothing. Hold tight. Lawyer up. The police had 24 hours to make something stick. Detective Miller leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Across the table, Skate sat relaxed, arms crossed, eyes half-lidded like he was about to fall asleep. "You know, I got all night," Miller said, flipping through a file. "That's the difference between you and me. I can sit here and watch you rot until you slip up." Skate smirked, stretching his legs. "Then I guess you wasting your damn night." Miller slammed the folder shut. The mail truck. The bodies. Law's in the other room singing like a damn canary. Skate chuckled, shaking his head. "You must think I'm stupid." Miller exhaled sharply, trying to keep his frustration in check. "You're gonna sit here for 24 hours. And when you leave, you think this all just goes away? You think the streets are gonna protect you?" Skate leaned forward, his grin fading. "I know one thing. The cops damn sure won't." Miller studied him, then stood up. "Enjoy your last few hours in here. 'Cause when we bring y'all back, it won't be for no 24-hour hold." He walked out, slamming the door behind him. Skate yawned and leaned back. They got nothing. Detective Ramirez sat across from Law, arms folded, face unreadable. Unlike Miller, he wasn't pressing too hard. He just stared. Law met his gaze, unfazed. "You waiting on me to break?" Ramirez shrugged. "Just giving you time to do the right thing." Law scoffed. "Yeah, and what's that?" Ramirez pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. A grainy image popped up. A burning truck, flames swallowing it whole in some abandoned lot. "You recognize this?" Ramirez asked. Law didn't blink. "Should I?" Ramirez smirked. "I got witnesses placing you and Skate near that warehouse. Got bodies stacking up. And sooner or later, somebody's gonna talk." La leaned forward, locking eyes with Ramirez. "Yeah? Well, it ain't gonna be me." Ramirez tapped his fingers on the table, then sighed. "All right." He stood up. "Your lawyer's here." Law smirked, leaning back. "'Bout time." The next morning, Skate and Law walked out of the precinct, the cold air hitting them as soon as they stepped through the doors. Their lawyer, a slick dude in a tailored suit, gave them a nod before heading off without another word. A black SUV was parked across the street, tinted windows, engine idling. Law and Skate exchanged a glance, then crossed the street and hopped in. Shooter was in the driver's seat, his face unreadable. "We good?" he asked. Law nodded. "For now." Shooter pulled off, the city swallowing them back into its chaos. But one thing was certain: the cops weren't done. And the streets? They were hotter than ever. The city was already hot. But when the bodies of Will and Cherry turned up, It went from pressure to full-blown fire. A jogger found Cherry first, her body dumped behind an abandoned building near the alley where Law had left her. The crime scene was messy. Blood dried on the pavement. Her hands curled like she had fought till the end. The coroner marked the time of death. The police took their photos. But nothing about her death seemed to shake them. Until they ran her name. That's when everything changed. Cherry wasn't just another girl from the streets. Her father was Senator Reginald Carter, a powerful politician from Virginia, known for his tough-on-crime stance and deep connections. The moment the ID was confirmed, calls were made. The police chief himself was briefed. This wasn't just another body. This was a problem that reached far beyond the streets. Later that same day, a group of kids cutting through Rock Creek Park stumbled upon the charred remains of a body near the edge of the woods. The smell hit them first. Burnt flesh, rotting, sickly sweet. By the time forensics arrived, there wasn't much left of Will. The fire had done its job well, but not well enough. A partial fingerprint, some dental records. They had enough to confirm it was him. The connection between the two murders didn't take long to piece together. The police knew Will had been running with Law and Skate. They knew Cherry had been mixed up in it too. Now, both of them were dead, and the mail truck was ash. The question was, who gave the order? And with Cherry's father involved, the investigation wasn't staying in the hood anymore. Now, the feds were coming, and nobody was safe. Will didn't have much family left. His funeral was small, held in a rundown funeral home on the south side, the kind where the walls were stained from old water leaks, and the chairs wobbled if you leaned too hard. A handful of people came through, some old heads who knew his pops, a few girls who used to be on his line, and a couple of his homeboys who showed up out of respect. Shooter was there, standing in the back, expression cold. Law and Skate? Nowhere in sight. Too hot outside for them right now. The preacher spoke, saying the usual words, but it didn't mean much. Will's casket was closed. Too much damage. A few tears fell, but not many. By the time the service ended, people left quick. They knew sticking around too long could mean trouble, and trouble wasn't far. Cherry's funeral wasn't some small-time send-off. This was an event, held in a massive church just outside Richmond. It was clear from the jump. This wasn't just about Cherry. This was about Senator Reginald Carter and the image he had to protect. Reporters were outside, cameras flashing, microphones shoved into the faces of anyone who might know something. Police lined the perimeter, not just for security, but because everyone knew someone in that church had blood on their hands. Cherry's mother, a well-dressed woman with sadness etched into her face, sat in the front row, barely holding it together. The senator sat beside her, stone-faced, his grip tight on the program in his lap. The church was packed. Politicians, community leaders, and people Cherry hadn't spoken to in years all came to show face. But the ones who really knew her, the ones who had seen her at her lowest, they were pushed to the back, eyes down, whispering among themselves. The service was long, full of speeches about change, about the dangers of the streets, about justice. But the hood knew what was up. This wasn't just grief. This was the start of something bigger. And once the caskets were in the ground, the real war was about to begin. While the city mourned, Law and Skate were already thinking 3 steps ahead. The racetrack was alive with energy, crowds yelling, tickets being waved, and the sound of hooves pounding against the dirt. It was the perfect spot for a quiet conversation in the middle of chaos. La leaned against the railing, watching the horses fly by. She had a cigarette in one hand, a racing ticket in the other. Skate stood beside him, keeping an eye on their surroundings. "We gotta move," Law muttered, taking a slow drag. "Hood's too damn hot." Skate nodded. They got eyes on everything. Every trap, every corner. Too many questions. Too many people looking for answers. Law flicked his cigarette to the ground and stepped on it. "We get the crew together. We leave. Start fresh." "Where we going?" Skate asked. Law smirked. "New York. Mayweather fight this weekend. Big money gonna be in town. It's the perfect cover to disappear." Skate exhaled, thinking it over. "Aight. Who we bringing?" "Everybody," Law said. "Anybody still breathing and loyal." By the next night, cars were packed. Bags were filled with cash, burner phones, and whatever they could carry. The crew moved in silence, taking different routes, switching cars at rest stops, keeping their heads down. By the time they hit Manhattan, the energy was different. The city was alive, flashing lights, packed streets, and the kind of fast money that made men greedy. Inside a luxury hotel near Madison Square Garden, the crew settled in. New town, new rules. But just because they left the hood behind didn't mean the past wasn't coming for them. And as the Mayweather fight approached, so did the next chapter of their game.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new one. I'll be back with the next episode of the series every Wednesday, so mark your calendars and stay tuned. Catch you next time.